chair now recognizes the gentleman from New Jersey's 8th District for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for calling this hearing today. But I want to provide context for what's happening in Congress this week, what's happening outside the committee's doors. The Speaker has announced that we are going to have canceled votes this week. He is limiting the legislative action that can be taken on the floor, and I think most Americans would want to know why. Why would we limit the things that we can do to further the interests of our constituents? What would that issue be? And the issue that has broken the Republican Party is their refusal to vote on the release of the Epstein files. Of all the things that we have to deal with as a country, the reason we can't do our work here is because Republicans refuse to deal with the Epstein files and the transparency that they promised the American people. The Republican Party is so broken that they refuse to hold this administration accountable or let us do our jobs to vote on legislation. But we're sitting here pretending that it's business as usual in this hearing room this morning when we know that's not the case. Let me also remind folks back home that just last month, Republicans passed their highly partisan reconciliation package, which included provisions to bypass the Clean Water Act and erode states' rights to protect our constituents from polluting pipelines and a giveaway to fossil fuel companies. So the same time that they're making it easier for fossil fuel companies to build pipelines in states and districts that don't want them, they're making it harder for Americans to access health care through Medicaid, through the ACA, by adding additional red tape. So easier for fossil fuel companies, harder for average Americans who are potentially dealing with long-term disabilities. The absolute lack of accountability is astounding. Last year, the House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee put together and approved a truly bipartisan bill that would have reauthorized PHMSA pipeline safety programs for the next 4 years, giving families in all of our communities peace of mind that our pipelines are safe. Unfortunately, last year, instead of coming to the table, Energy and Commerce Republicans offered a bill that authorized significantly less than what we approved on T&I, to the tune of $80 million less per year. In fact, the Republican Energy and Commerce bill would have cut activities that keep our communities safe by 18% from the 2020 authorization levels. Mr. Karam, can you briefly touch on what a cut like this would mean for pipeline safety for all of our constituents?
Yes, thank you for that. Inflation, since the last pipeline authorization, the Pipes Act of 2020, inflation has been over 20%. So an increase of anything less than 20% in this reauthorization would be a cut in funding. On top of that, there's new jurisdiction for PHMSA and gathering lines and the potential build out of CO2 and hydrogen pipelines, all of which would require more funding. So a cut below the 2020 authorization would be quite drastic.
And it would make it more difficult for hiring and retaining the experts that we need to coordinate critical elements of our pipeline safety programs. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And with the ongoing layoffs and buyouts, we know that that's going to have an impact on pipeline safety programs. Is that correct?
I believe so. I'm looking forward to hearing more about what's happening there.
Yeah, because we now have even less staff and an already understaffed agency that is responsible for keeping all of our families safe from the dangers of neglected pipelines. Republicans are proposing to cut an already under-resourced agency, all while they're actively passing legislation and pushing for more pipelines. So less staff, less funding, and more work to do. It's highly concerning to me that the Trump administration is turning a blind eye to bad behavior by fossil fuel companies while they're actively hamstringing the agency responsible for holding these companies accountable and keeping us all safe. And Republicans in Congress are enabling it by cutting resources for PHMSA and adding to their workload. Would you say that the Republican approach to safety is making Americans less safe or more safe?
I would say cuts to PHMSA would make Americans less safe.
Correct. And we know that the T&I has a bill that would actually make a bipartisan bill that would provide the resources needed. But again, this committee, the Republicans on this committee, chose to go a different route and not act in a truly bipartisan way. This is all problematic because Democrats on this committee want to deal with the challenges that we have in this country. We want to do in a thoughtful, bipartisan, bicameral way. We were able to do that on T&I. So it's not impossible. People think that we can't do these things in a bipartisan way. We absolutely can. T&I has shown us the way. This committee needs to follow T&I's lead to get those things done for the American people, to keep our constituents safe. I hope that's the work that we can do in this Congress, but apparently we won't be able to do it because Republicans refuse to release the Epstein files. I yield back.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time, and the